Welcome to this lecture on research methodology. Today, we are diving into one of the most critical phases of any scientific investigation: data collection methods. Whether you are studying animal behavior in zoology, testing a new medical treatment, or analyzing environmental changes, the way you gather your information determines the validity of your entire study. Let us explore how researchers ensure their findings are built on a solid, reliable foundation. To begin, imagine you are hosting a massive dinner party for your entire university, and you need to know what everyone wants to eat. You cannot possibly walk up to 10,000 students and ask them individually. Instead, you might send out a quick online poll or check the cafeteria's past sales records. This everyday problem-solving technique is exactly what scientists and researchers do, just on a much more formal scale. Data collection is simply the systematic process of gathering information to answer a specific question or solve a specific problem. Do not feel overwhelmed. We are just learning how to ask the right questions to the right people in the right way. Now that we understand what data collection is conceptually, let us look at how it is categorized in academic research. We generally divide these methods into two main categories: primary data and secondary data. Primary data collection means you are gathering fresh, first-hand information directly from the source. You are the one conducting the surveys, interviews, observations, or experiments. On the other hand, secondary data collection means you are using information that someone else has already gathered. This could be government census reports, historical books, or previous scientific studies. By understanding both approaches, a researcher can choose the most efficient and accurate way to find the truth for their specific project. Building on those definitions, let us visualize this structure through a flowchart. At the very top, we have our main subject: data collection methods. Notice how it splits into two distinct branches. On the left, the primary data branch breaks down into active methods, where the researcher is directly involved: surveys, interviews, observations, and experiments. On the right, the secondary data branch flows into sources where the data already exists: government reports, academic journals, historical records, and databases. This diagram serves as a mental map, helping you quickly identify which tools belong to which research approach. With our methods mapped out, we must ask, why does this categorization matter so much in the real world? The entire foundation of any scientific discovery, medical breakthrough, or business strategy relies entirely on the quality of the data collected. There's a famous saying in computer science and research called garbage in, garbage out. This simply means that if your data collection is flawed, your final conclusions will be completely wrong, no matter how good your analysis is. For example, if a pharmaceutical company collects inaccurate data during a clinical trial, they might release a drug that does not actually work. Proper data collection methods ensure that our research is trustworthy, reliable, and genuinely useful to society. Understanding the importance of quality leads us to a practical question. How do we know if our data collection was actually successful? When we collect primary data, especially through surveys or questionnaires, we need a mathematical way to measure our effort. We do this by calculating the response rate. This metric tells us the percentage of people who actually participated out of everyone we originally invited. A high response rate means our data is likely very representative of the population, giving us confidence in our findings. Conversely, a low response rate might mean our data is biased, warning us that we might only be hearing from a specific, vocal minority. To quantify the success, let us look at the simple formula used to calculate this crucial metric. The formula is R equals R divided by N multiplied by 100. Let us break down these symbols. The symbol R represents the final response rate, which is always expressed as a percentage. The variable R stands for the number of completed responses we actually received from our participants. The variable N represents the total number of surveys or invitations we originally sent out to the target audience. Conceptually, when the value of R increases while N stays the same, our response rate goes up, indicating a highly successful effort. Conversely, if N is very large but R remains small, the response rate drops, warning us that our method might be failing. Now that we have our formula, let us apply it to a real-world scenario. Suppose you are conducting a research study on the mental health of university students. You email a survey link to a total of 800 students across the campus. After 2 weeks, you see that 620 students have fully completed it. We need to calculate the response rate. We know our N variable is 800, and our R variable is 620. We substitute these into our equation, dividing 620 by 800. This gives us a decimal value of 0.775, representing roughly 3/4 of the students. Multiplying by 100 gives us our final answer of 77.5%. Physically, this high number tells the researcher that the collected data is highly reliable and accurately represents the broader student population. Having seen how to measure responses, we must step back and face another massive mathematical problem that occurs before we even start collecting data. How many people do we actually need to survey to get accurate results in the first place? This is a delicate balancing act. If we survey too few people, our data is statistically meaningless and cannot be trusted. However, surveying too many people wastes valuable time, effort, and funding. To solve this dilemma, researchers do not just guess. They use a specific mathematical tool called Cochrane's formula. This formula calculates exactly how many responses we need to be statistically confident in our data collection for large populations. Before we look at the exact mathematics of sample sizes, we must understand the variables that influence it. Calculating an ideal sample size requires understanding population dynamics. First, we have the confidence level, which dictates how statistically certain we need our final results to be. Second, we must estimate the population proportion, which represents the expected variance or split in the responses we might get. Finally, we must define our margin of error, which sets the acceptable limit of inaccuracy we are willing to tolerate. Balancing these three conceptual pillars allows researchers to pinpoint exactly how much data is enough. Now that we understand these conceptual pillars, let us look at how they combine mathematically. Let us break down what every symbol in this powerful formula means. The formula is N0 equals Z squared times P times Q, all divided by E squared. The variable N0 represents the ideal sample size, the exact number of people we need. The symbol Z is the Z-score, a statistical value based on how confident we want to be, like 95%. The variable P represents the estimated proportion of the population that has the attribute we are studying, and Q is simply 1 minus P. Finally, the variable E represents the desired margin of error, which is how much inaccuracy we are willing to accept. Notice that E is squared in the denominator. This means if we want a smaller margin of error, the required sample size will drastically increase. Before we conclude, let us see Cochrane's formula in action. Imagine researching public transit preference in a massive city. You want 95% confidence, giving a z-score of 1.96. With no prior data, you assume maximum variability, so P and Q are both zero point 0.5. You want a strict 5% margin of error, so E is 0.05. We substitute these into our formula. First, we square the z-score to get 3.8416 and multiply P and Q to get 0.25. We also square our margin of error to get 0.0025. Multiplying the numerator gives 0.9604. Dividing this by our denominator gives 384.16. Since we cannot survey a fraction of a person, we always round up. Our final answer is exactly 385 individuals, guaranteeing our data collection will be scientifically valid. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us reinforce the most important ideas. First, data collection is the essential, systematic process of gathering raw information to answer complex questions. We learned that primary data involves fresh, first-hand gathering, while secondary data relies on historical or pre-existing archives. Second, we saw that the quality of your research depends entirely on these methods. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. Finally, we utilized mathematical tools like response rate calculations and Cochrane's sample size formula to guarantee that our efforts are both efficient and scientifically valid. Mastering these concepts and formulas is your first major step in becoming a truly capable and confident researcher. Thank you for your attention.